Okay, so everyone, welcome to today's review day. Okay, we're going to start from unit number 3's grammar, and in here we have two actual things. Okay, first thing that we're going to focus on will be the narrative tenses, and after the narrative tenses, we will also learn a little bit about used to and usually. These two words, actually, okay, and how they're used and how they can help us. Okay, starting with section number 1, narrative tenses. Now, narrative tenses, guys, are not very hard, but first thing that we should know is actual the name, what it means and like why it's important. So, narrative tenses, guys, is actually taken from the word narrate or the verb narrate. Now, to narrate means to tell stories, okay? So we can say that narrative tenses, or those tenses, we use to tell past stories in English language or in the English language, yeah. So, and in this lesson, we study three of them. Okay, there are like more than three actually, but in today's lesson, you only need three of them. Okay, starting. The first one is the past simple. So we use the past simple to describe the main events of a story in the order they happen. And please be careful, everyone. In here, we don't really have the structures written here because you already have studied all of these tenses before. But if you do have any questions, you can ask. But my suggestion, focus on the examples, okay? And there we can also get the structure. So we are using the past simple, in narrative tenses context to describe the main events of a story. So when you are telling a story and you want to say the main event, the events that are the most important, we can use the past simple, okay? And past simple also helps us to talk about that in the order they happen, or we can also call it in a chronological order, okay? Meaning according to time. What happened first, what happened second. In that area, we can use past simple. Example is we worked on a project together at the university. So we worked on a project together, or the act of working on a project together is the main event of my story. And we also have another one, another main event, and this one happened in sequence of this, meaning it happened after this other one. So again, I'm using past simple. I'm gonna say later, meaning after this one, we started our own business. Okay, so either way, it's main event, and of course, it tells us the order. This one happened first, and after the project, we also started our own business. Okay. But what about the past continuous? So we talked about the past simple. What about the past continuous? Now, we use the past continuous one to describe the situation at the beginning of the story. So when you want to start your story and say like, that day I was coming home from work. Now, this is a very good way. When you want to start, when you want to talk about the situation at the beginning of your story, past continuous is a really good choice, okay? Another use for this one is when you want to talk about longer actions in comparison with shorter ones, okay? And those shorter actions will be, of course, in the past simple. Example can be like, I was cooking dinner when you took my picture. So the act of, cooking dinner, of course, is going to be longer than the act of taking a picture. So, the longer one is used in the past continuous one, and the shorter one is using the past simple. And the use number 3, or the third one, we can also use the past continuous when actions are interrupted by main events in the past simple. Mostly these actions are longer actions and they are using the past continuous. Example, she was speaking when you called her. So she was speaking. This person was in the middle of a speech, and when you called her, you interrupted her, meaning that you stopped her from giving her speech completely or entirely. So this is another use of the past continuous. So, how to connect the past simple to the past continuous? There are many ways, of course, but in your book, in this level, we only focus on 3 of them. to connect the past simple and the past continuous actions, we can use as, we can use while, or we can also use when. For example, Tony saw a bird as he was walking down the road. So Tony saw a bird, and this is the past simple one, and after as in here we have our past continuous sentence. As he was walking down the road. And you can make a lot more sentences using while, when, or even as again. So what about the past continuous with state verbs? Is that even possible? Well, to answer it, very briefly, no. Do not use the past continuous with the state verbs, okay? If you want to talk about state verbs, use the past simple instead. Example or examples, Qudus met his friend when he was a student. So Qudus met his friend when he was a student. This is correct. But if I say that Qudus met his friend when he was being a student, I mean using a past continuous in this case, this one is not really good. It's incorrect, okay? Because we don't need this kind of use here. I mean, of course, it has its own use case, this sentence especially, he was being a student, but this is not going to be correct in everyday conversations, okay? So in here, it's just a state verb, and with state verbs, it's much, much better to just use the past simple instead. Okay. So the other tense, or the last tense in this case, is the past perfect. We use the past perfect to describe an event that happened before the story is started, or even earlier in the story than a main event. So we talked about many things, right? We talked about, the main event itself. This was the main event. We were using the past continuous for the, background information kind of thing, like at the beginning or longer actions. Again, not very, very important. But now you're actually talking about another action. In here, you're talking about another action or event that happened before the story even started. So to talk about that, you can use the past perfect, or even to talk about an action or an event that happened before the main action or the main event of your story. Okay? Example, that day I had just received my salary. Had received, the past perfect. So I had just received my salary. Now, what happened after that? Your story happened. Your main event happened. But of course, it has to continue. Okay? For it to make sense. But, this was just one example. We do have a tip here, guys, for those who are interested in using past perfect. We use a good phrase here, by plus a time. So a time can be any time you want. We use by, the word by, plus a time with the past perfect to show what happened up to a point in the past. Up to that point, or up to that time that you mentioned here, okay? Example, I came home very late that night, and by the time I arrived, everyone had slept. Okay, so in here means like what happened up to a point in the past. So the point in the past is me arriving at home, or me arriving home. And what happened up to that point? Everybody slept. That happened. The sleeping of everybody happened, So this is a very, very nice example for that. Okay, section 2 is about used to and usually. I'm just going to stop the recording, and if you do have any questions, I think you can ask. If not, then we will continue with section 2 as well. If no questions are there, then we are going to continue. Okay, coming back, guys, section 2, used to and usually. Let's talk about that now. So let's talk about the usage of used to. We use used to describe past habits and past states. Easy, it's much, much easier than the first section. The first one is the example of a past habit, actually. So I used to play soccer every day. This is a habit that you had in the past, and now you don't normally play soccer. And another one is the state. We used to love ice cream, meaning we loved it in the past, but now we don't really love it. So the usage of used to is very easy to talk about past habits and also to talk about past states. But what about negative? Like how to make used to negative, how to negate used to. So we have two ways of making used to negative. The first one is using didn't used to, and the other one is using never used to. Both of them are really good. The only difference that is actually important to you right now is the fact that when you say never used to, you're just being a bit more emphatic, okay? Meaning that you're emphasizing, you're adding emphasis that, you know, it's something in the past and you didn't do that in the past. Okay. But what about used to in the present? Do we have any, used to in the present? The answer is no. We don't really have any form of used to in the present, at least giving us the meaning that we want. So in the present, we can use adverbs of frequency. Okay? For instance, we have an example in here using usually. I usually leave work at 2 on Fridays. This is a habit. This is a habit, but this is not a past habit. This is a present habit. So that's why it's very important to know that used to in the present doesn't really work. That's why we have a workaround, and that workaround is called using adverbs of frequency. Okay, but what about adverbs of frequency in the past? Now, this is something that, it's going to kind of, confuse some of you out there, because most people that I know actually have been misinformed about this. They've learned that, adverbs of frequency cannot be used in the past, and that is, utterly wrong. That is entirely wrong. You can use adverbs of frequency in the past as well, okay? So instead of used to, if you don't like used to, we can also use adverbs of frequency with some past time phrases in the past to give the meaning of used to in a way. So to talk about a past habit or to talk about a past state. Example, we usually came home by bikes back then. So usually is your adverb of frequency, and back then becomes your time phrase or your past time phrase. Now it's doing the same thing. It's talking about a past habit, but not using used to. Which, I mean, of course, if you like, learn it and make a ton of examples, and you're gonna get better. Okay. What about the word still? Sorry. So we use the adverb or the word still with the present simple. Okay, with which tense, guys? Present simple. To talk about a past state or a past habit that has not changed, meaning that it's something that you started doing in the past and still you have that habit. Okay, or is still that state is true. So you can use still for that. For instance, if I say I still play soccer, see, I'm using still with the present simple. It just means that, as I did in the past too, meaning that in the past I also played soccer and now I also play, or I still play soccer. Yeah, so still is a very, very good word that gives us that other meaning, the one that we have in here in parentheses, as like indirectly or implied meaning in there. Okay. So what about past simple or used to? So what about this competition? Which of them should you use? Okay. So we used to for situations that were true for a long time. Not used, or sorry, I think it shouldn't be in the past. Okay, we used to for a situation that were true for a long time. Examples like a few months or a few years or something like that. But for shorter periods of time, we can use the past simple. Example, when I was away on vacation, I had breakfast in bed every morning. Now, as you can see, I'm using what? The past simple. I'm not using used to. So it wouldn't be really good if I say, when I was away on vacation, I used to have breakfast in bed every morning. Now, it would be good. It would be good, but that is only, applicable. Let's say that is only, accepted, or that would only be correct under one condition or on one condition, and that condition is that your vacation would be very long time, which you and I know are not very long time. Vacations are not very long times. So in that regard, we can just say, like, just use a past simple. I had breakfast. It's okay. You don't need to say I used to have breakfast, even though it does give meaning. Okay. So remember, used to for long time situations, and for shorter ones, use the past simple. And another thing that we should also know is that when you're talking about something that happened once, okay, happened once in the past, or even it happened a specific number of times, we are using past simple. For example, I killed Ali. So the act of killing Ali is something that happened once. So you cannot say that I used to kill Ali. Like, what do you mean? It's not your habit to go and kill Ali, right? Because how many Alis are you going to kill, and how many times are you going to kill? That's just not possible. Okay, so in here, just use the past simple. And we are done with this, guys. I'm just going to stop again. If you have any questions, raise your hand and ask it. Okay, guys, so let's start now. Okay, let's start. Yes, okay. Again, B1 course, B1 plus, sorry, B1 plus course, and we are now in unit number 4. So unit number 4 also has 2 sections. The first one will be about modals and phrases of ability, and after that we'll also talk about articles. Okay? We'll also talk about articles. So starting with section number 1, modals and phrases of ability. So we have a lot of modals and a lot of different phrases in English that we can use in order to talk about ability. But in general, there are 2 different versions. You can use them to talk about general ability, or you can use them to talk about specific past achievements that are easier to understand if you just say specific abilities at like one time in the past. Okay, so for instance, like you graduating was a specific past achievement, but you being able to swim in the past is a general ability. Okay. So, starting with general ability. When you're talking about general abilities, we can use can. Very easy. We can use can for present abilities, and the structure is like subject, can, infinitive, complement, or object. For instance, I can swim. Yeah, or I can talk in front of people. Different ways you can, of course, make. Another one is using could, but could is actually different from can. We use it for not present, but past abilities, and the structure is kind of the same. Subject, but not can, you're using could, and then infinitive and complement or object. For instance, like I could swim in cold water, but now I cannot, something like that. Okay. Again, general ability, but we have a question now. What about other tenses? So you talked about the present, you talked about the past, but what about other tenses? Well, easy version, use be able to. Use what? Be able to. Be able to can be used with the perfect tenses. It can be used with the modals. It can also be used with other tenses, but we haven't put it in here because you booked it in deem it necessary, so we're just going to stick to perfect tenses, but you can use be able to for other ones as well. For instance, I have been able to drive cars for 10 years. This one is using the present perfect. She should be able to speak English. She studied for 5 years once again in here, but you're using the modals one. So be able to is a good phrase of ability that you can use in different tenses. Another one is be able to, but this time using some specific verbs like want or need, and also some prepositions like about or of. Example, the president needs to be able to control a country. Needs to be able to. So you are using be able to after need. Of course, with the infinitive version, so you're adding a to there. And then you also have using some kind of prepositions like he hopes okay? Sorry. Yeah, he hopes of being able to drive luxury cars one day. So after of, we're using be able to, a form of be able to, which will be the being able to one. Okay, so there are many forms of be able to that you can use. Mostly, of course, able to is not changing, but be is doing all the changing. Okay. So what about, we talked about general ability, right? What about specific past achievements like graduation or something like that? So one thing to know is that we don't really use could for specific past achievements. I mean, it is possible, but just to avoid confusion and set a standard, could is better if you use it with general ones, as people can guess it much easier and they can understand it much better. So instead of could, you can use be able to for that. Okay. For instance, when I went to Bamyan last year, I could swim in Bandemir. This is okay. I mean, could swim kind of gives meaning in here, but I mean, as mentioned before, to set a standard and to avoid confusion, it's better to just use be able to for that. For instance, when I went to Bamyan last year, I was able to swim in Bandemir. So being able to swim in Bandemir only in last year, this is a specific past achievement, okay? Okay, but how to make them negative? Now, for negative sentences about specific past achievements, we can use two kind of things. We can use couldn't, the negative of could, or we can use wasn't or weren't able to, again, the negative of be able to in the past. Okay? But what about here? Again, to talk about specific past achievements that were very difficult. So now we're done with the negative, we're done with the normal ones. But what about if they were very difficult? Those achievements, we can use managed to, managed to. Okay? So, for instance, Kudus finally managed to pass the final term exam in 2020. Meaning that it is a specific past achievement, so passing the final term exam, and it was very difficult. Okay, and how do we know it's very difficult? Because you're using managed to. Okay, so managed to it has like an indirect meaning of it, that the achievement you're talking about or the ability you're talking about was very difficult. Okay. And the negative one, Qudus didn't manage to pass the final term exam in 2020. Once again, talking about a specific past thing. You can say achievement, but of course he couldn't do it, so it doesn't really matter if you say achievement or not. But it is specific and it is in the past, okay? And also it is very difficult. That's why he couldn't pass it. Okay, section 2 is articles, but before we go there, I'm just gonna see if you have any questions. Okay, guys, so section 2 now, articles. Now, articles is also a very easy topic, so let's start. We are using a, an, and the, or in full pronunciation, a, and the, with singular countable nouns. Don't forget that, okay? With what? Singular countable nouns. We use the or no article with plural or uncountable nouns. Now, this is something that if you know this, like you know at least 80% of it already, okay? A and the is used with singular and countable nouns. So it must be singular, it must be countable. But we're using the again in this case, see, it's repeated, or even no article sometimes with plural or uncountable nouns. But the meanings will, of course, be different, so we're going to talk about that. Okay, so first, the choice. How do you choose? Okay, so the choice depends on whether the topic is new or not. Like, if the topic is new, we have to choose a specific one. If the topic is old, we have to choose another one, okay? The choice also depends on whether something is the only one. Like, in all the world, or at least in that context, in that area, you have only one of it. So if you have only one of it, people know what you're talking about, you're going to use a specific article. And the choice also depends on whether we are talking about things in general or in particular. Okay? So, let's start. Is it a new topic? The question. So, if it is a new topic, we use a or an to show that that topic is new. For instance, I bought a car. I bought a car, a car, a car. See? You don't know which car I've bought because we haven't talked about it. The topic is completely new. Or we use the to show that the topic is not new and was already discussed before. For instance, hey man, I just bought the phone. The phone. Now you know about the phone because I have told you before, or because I had told you before. Like every day I come to you, I say that, I really love the S23 Ultra, or I love the Z Fold 5 or whatever, right? So every day that I come to you and I talk about one specific phone, so that topic is not now new. It's a discussed topic. It's a topic that is already discussed. So I can use the for that. Okay, just say, I just bought the phone. The phone. And people know what phone I'm talking about. Okay, is it the only thing we have? For instance, if it is something that, we don't have a lot of it and it's just only one of it, we can use the. For instance, where's the TV? We only have one TV, so I don't need to say where's the TV, where's the blue TV, where's the red TV. No, where's the TV? Just where's the TV? Because it's particular, it's very specific, and there's only one of it, of course. Okay? Now, talking about the fact that if something is like, if the noun that you're talking about, or are you talking about that noun generally, or are you talking about it in particular, meaning that you're talking about it specifically? If we talk about things in general, we use no article with plural nouns. Okay, just be careful of that. For instance, dogs are beautiful animals. Dogs are beautiful animals. Now, of course, you can also use it with uncountable nouns like salt. Like salt is necessary for cooking, but in general, in here we're using plural nouns because it's easier to define as well and explain more. So dogs are beautiful animals. I'm talking about all dogs. So in general, all dogs. That's why I'm not using any article. But if we come here, if we talk about things in particular, meaning specifically, we use the. For instance, the dogs are not at home. Have you seen them? Like we have some dogs at home, our pets. I come home from work and I ask you, hey, have you seen the dogs? They're not at home. The dogs. When I say the dogs, uh, I mean our pets. I mean our pets. I'm not talking about others. Okay? Of course, in the world there are a lot of dogs, but I'm talking about the dogs that we have at home. Okay, so that's why we say the dogs. So this one is particular. Okay, some other uses of and an. So when you describe something or say what job someone has, we can also use or an. Like, hey, you have a cool car, or I'm a teacher, or she's an engineer, something like that. Or we can also use them in some frequency expressions, like he studies Spanish twice a day, thrice a day, 50 times a month, see? Or Qudus kills people 3 times a month, different things. But in general, we can use or an. Um, sorry. And the point in here, guys, is, you should know it, but of course, it's not very important. I'm not sure why did I say the point is. But, you can make it much more formal if you say, like, you study Spanish twice in a day, like adding in the preposition in, but many people don't use that. So just this and kind of replaces in for us as well. Okay, so it's really, really good if you want to learn like that. Okay. And some other uses of the. So the noun is defined by a defining relative clause, meaning that we can use the if or when the noun is defined by a defining relative clause. For instance, I've studied at the school that is located in London. So that is located in London is the defining relative clause, and I'm using the in here next to the noun because that is the noun that is being defined. Or Julie is the girl who won the lottery. Again, who won the lottery is relative clause, and girl is the noun that is being defined. We can also use the before superlatives like the biggest TV, the tallest man, the most beautiful singer, different ones. Or we can also use them with certain countries, certain oceans, rivers, or groups of islands. For instance, the USA. Some countries use it, of course, not all of them. Some of them, like the USA, the UK, the Republic of China, like different ways, of course. But if, as a good rule of thumb, if the name of the country is a bit longer, mostly we're using that there. Okay? meaning it's made from not just one word, maybe two or three. Or names of rivers, as mentioned before, the Amazon River, or the oceans like the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, or whatever. And we can also use the with some fixed expressions about the following things, like some fixed expressions about time, like saying all the time or most of the time. That is here. Some expressions about places or seasons, like in the city, in the summer. About free time activities like go to the cinema, listen to the radio. Like saying go to cinema or listen to radio, not really good. It's better to put that the there just because, it's fixed expressions. So normally we don't really change that. Okay, and some other uses of no article, okay? In phrases about meals, we can use no articles, like I had dinner. Don't say I had the dinner, don't say I had a dinner, just say I had dinner last night. In some fixed phrases about routines, again, so I go to school, not I go to the school, I just go to school, okay? And also to talk about most countries, most continents, and most cities. I love Japan. I love Brazil, like those countries that mostly are not made from two or three words, so they just take no article. A tip to remember: be careful with expressions with next, last, next or last plus week or month or year, because the meaning might be different. For instance, if you say I went there last week, it means that the calendar week before now. If you say I've been there twice in the last week, it means the 7 days before now. So not really, focusing on the calendar week itself, but more about your own understanding of one week, which is totally 7 days. It can, for you, your 7 days can be like starting from Friday, ending in one day before Friday, which is like Thursday, I think. Yeah, you can select something like that. So that is your 7 days, but a normal calendar week mostly starts from Monday and they end in Sunday. Yeah, okay. Um, sorry. Or we went there in the last week of the holidays. Now it means a period of time with no connection to now. Okay. Thank you, guys. If you do have any questions, of course, about this part before we go to the next grammar, raise your hand and we can talk. Okay, everyone. So let's now continue with the grammar of unit number 5. So unit number 5 also has two sections. The first one is about future forms, and the second section is about zero and first conditionals. Starting with section number 1, future forms. Now, when we're talking about decisions, plans, and arrangements, this slide is going to help you. So we use will for spontaneous decisions, meaning those ones that are made at the time of speaking. Okay? For instance, I will do the assignment with you, don't worry. So this is not a plan that I had made before, but it's just something that was done spontaneously. Or we can use going to when we're talking about future plans, of course, the ones that are made earlier. For instance, I'm going to become an engineer in the future. This is like a future plan that I made, let's say, 57 years ago. So now I'm going to talk about, right? That I can use going to. Or you can also use present continuous for arrangements, like fixed plans, okay? It means what? Fixed plans. Let me just allow your friend. Yeah, it just means fixed plans, or usually, or those ones, I mean arrangements, or those ones that involve other people and specific times and specific places. For instance, I'm meeting my friends for dinner tonight at 8 o'clock. I'm meeting my friends tonight at 8 o'clock, or for dinner tonight at 8 o'clock. This is more of an arrangement rather than a future plan. Okay, so what about offers, promises, and suggestions? So we're using will to to make offers and to make promises. For instance, you can tell me your secrets, I won't tell anyone. This is not an offer actually. In here, this is more of a promise. But what about shall I or shall we? You can say shall I or shall we in questions, of course, to make offers or to make suggestions. For instance, shall we go and see the new Barbie movie? This is a suggestion that you can make to your friend, for instance. What about predictions? Well, you can use will to make predictions based on your opinions. Like if you have a prediction about a future, but it's about your opinion, so you can use will. You can say like Qudus will kill Ali. I just know it. This is your opinion. This is a prediction about a future, but it's about you. You know, you think it's gonna happen, so you can use will. But you can use going to as well to also talk about predictions, but not the ones based on opinions. Actually, these ones are the ones that are based on concrete facts, like information we have read or things we can see actually. For instance, it's going to rain soon. Don't you see the clouds? So by seeing the clouds, you and I can actually, come to a conclusion that it's going to rain soon. Okay. Small tip. In negative sentences, say I don't think plus will is much better. Don't say I think plus will not. That is not really, really good. Okay. I mean, it's a common mistake. Of course, it has its meaning, but many people when they're using it, they don't know that they're using it in that way because they actually want to say this one. Okay. For instance, I don't think the forest will recover. I don't think the forest will recover. If you are showing, a negative opinion about something, like you don't believe that it's gonna happen, right? You can say I don't think plus the forest will recover. It's much better. Don't say I think the forest won't recover. This just sounds unnatural. Section 2 is about zero and first conditional. If you do have any questions, guys, before we continue, just raise your hand and ask. Good. Okay, so no questions. Let's now continue. Section 2, zero and first conditional. Now, zero and first conditionals, guys. In general, conditional sentences have two parts. One part is called the if clause, and the other part is called the main clause. Now, the if clause describes a possible event, and the main clause describes the result of that event, of that possible event. The if clause can come before or even after the main clause. For instance, in here, if the lizard gets scared, it hides, or the lizard hides if it gets scared. And either way, they're both right. Just one thing to know that if you bring the if clause at the beginning, you need to separate it from the main clause using a comma. Okay? So it describes events and results that, what is that? Sorry, zero conditional. Zero conditional describes events and results that happen regularly or are always true. Instead of if, you can also use when in here. Present tense is used in both clauses. For instance, if the lizard gets scared, it hides. This is something that is going to happen most of the time. It's always true. If I go to the city center, I always eat in that restaurant. Once again, it's an event that mostly happens. Anyone can succeed if they work hard. Again, always true. And butter doesn't burn in the pan if you add a little oil to it. Once again, it's something that is true. It's not something that changes in one day and then the other day you have something else. What about the first conditional, guys? So the first conditional describes possible future events and the expected results of those events. So a present tense is used in the if clause, and also a future form is used in the main clause. If the scientists succeed, many people will live longer. Or if I don't work hard, I won't be successful. Once again, these things are not set in stone. These things are not always true, but at least the chance of them happening, the results are very much expected. Okay? Will you have to commute if you get the job? This is a question style, and he'll cook you an amazing meal if you ask him to. He loves showing off. So this is again something that is not always true, but at least mostly it is the expected result. Like if you ask him, about 90% maybe he will actually go and cook. something. Okay, so that's why we're using the first conditional. One thing that we have not written here, guys, but you can do it, of course. You can use when in the first conditional as well, but it just will be a little more sure. It will make it a little more certain. So many people say that it's not good to use it like that, because if you're very certain, just use zero conditional. Why do you have to use first conditional? But I think that it's okay. You can use the first conditional with when, just to show that you are very, very sure of this. So, for instance, you can say, if I don't work hard, of course, this is good. But if we make it a sentence more that has a feeling, related to your experience, let's say at least is related to your experience, you can say like, when I study, I will pass the exam. When I study, I will pass the exam. So it just focuses on the fact that this if clause will happen. It will happen. We know it will happen. But the only problem is when it will happen. So the only question is when it will happen. We know it's going to happen. But when you say if, you're just saying that, maybe it will happen, or maybe this will never even happen. Even the if clause might not even happen. So if the scientists succeed, you're not even sure if they succeed or not. But if you say that when the scientists succeed, you're just giving it a bit more certainty. You're saying that the scientists will succeed. Of course they will succeed. The only question is, when will they succeed? Okay. So what about imperative conditionals? I know it might be kind of new for some of you, so let's talk about it. We can use imperatives in the main clause, and the meaning can be present or future. This is called imperative conditionals. For instance, if you're tired now, go to bed now. See, like this one is talking about the present one. But what about the future one? If you're tired when you arrive, which you haven't arrived yet because you even haven't maybe left yet. So if you're tired when you arrive, go to bed. Again, then it's about the future. Go to bed. So the main clause will be not using the future form, will not be using any other ones. It will be using the imperative. And that makes it the imperative conditional. Okay, what about unless? Now, if you're not interested in using if, you can use unless. Unless means if not. Just be careful, it means if not. So the not is already implied when you say unless. We can use it in zero or even first conditionals, and also with imperatives. For instance, we play every Saturday unless it rains. So it means like we play every Saturday if it doesn't rain. The meaning is like if it doesn't rain. So the not is in doesn't, if it doesn't rain. But if you don't want to say like that, you can say unless it rains. Or it won't hurt you unless you run away. Meaning that, in again, simpler terms, it won't hurt you if you don't run away. Meaning that don't run away if you don't want to be hurt. Something like that. Okay, read carefully. Another tip. In general, don't use a future form, so kind of like will or going to, in the if clause, or even after when or unless, because, future form doesn't kind of work in here. For instance, if the government changes the law, this area will become a national park. If you say that if the government will change the law, this area will become a national park, two wills again just doesn't really work. It just doesn't really work. Same thing in here. So the only difference is that you're not using if in the if clause, you're using unless in the if clause. We're going to miss the bus unless we leave right now. This is kind of good. But if you say we're going to miss the bus unless we are going to leave right now, again, doesn't really work. So inside the if clause and inside, if clause itself, like whether you're using unless or when, whatever, it doesn't matter. But inside the if clause, don't use a future form. And thank you guys. If you do have any questions, you can ask right now. I'm just going to stop the recording and come to you. Very good then. Okay, guys, so no questions. I think we're done, so I'm gonna stop the recording as well. Goodbye to the recording, to the people who watch it, let's say.